Ada mereka yang jatuh, ada mereka yang sakit, ada mereka yang kehilangan, ada mereka yang meninggalkan. Tidak satu, tidak dua, mereka pergi bergerombol dalam gelombang bernama kematian. Pandemi akan pergi seperti kabut yang hilang sebelum fajar. Asal kalian tidak membawa ego, bergerombol di sana-sini, berhahaha mengabaikan yang diatur. Sungguh elok jika kalian peduli atas nama kemanusiaan. Pakai masker, harga mati. Gak pakai masker, bisa mati.
So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Ann Barker from ABC Australia, and also all of the journalists from GFCC that is joining for this press conference sessions today. On today's event, I will give updates on the development of the COVID-19 management in Indonesia, and with enthusiasm, discipline, and collective efforts from all levels of the government and society, Indonesia has now managed to get out of the second peak that occurred last July, relatively quick and drastic. In just 1 month, cases can drop 45% from the second peak, and to date, the decline has been ongoing for 12 weeks and has managed to drop by 98%. Compared to other countries, Indonesia's COVID cases increase pattern was considerably different. The first peak in cases occurred simultaneously in various countries in December 2020 due to the Christmas and New Year period, including in Indonesia. However, when various parts of the world experienced the second peak in April 2021, Indonesia actually showed a decline. On the other hand, when Indonesia experienced the second peak in July, the world and several other countries were experiencing a decline in cases. And the world is currently experiencing a decline from the third peak in cases in August, and several countries, including neighboring countries such as Japan, Singapore, and also Malaysia, also experienced a third peak in cases, while Indonesia has experienced a decline from the second peak. The existence of the third peak in several countries is a warning for Indonesia to not put its guard down, regardless of the ongoing trend of cases decline. Additionally, the government is aware that the peak of cases in Indonesia is not exclusively caused by the collective increase in the number of cases among other countries. It was rather caused due to our national dynamics and policy implementation, especially during national holidays. And the Indonesian government continues to improve various efforts to prevent COVID-19, including vaccination. And currently, Indonesia is included in the top 5 countries with the largest number of vaccinated population, amounting to 106 million people. Despite of the large number of population in Indonesia, the government still managed to acquire significant number of vaccines and distribute them accordingly. The government will continue to strive to increase and evenly distribute vaccinations throughout the region. And moving forward to the updates of COVID-19 cases development in Indonesia, currently cases have decreased for 13 consecutive weeks from the second peak of cases. In the last week, positive cases have fallen to 6,826 after hitting the highest number of 542,236 during the second peak. Cases that continue to fall also have an impact on the decline in recovery numbers. Last week, there were 12,567 people recovered, down from the highest number of recoveries in the second peak of 176,000 934 people. And active cases, which had reached 542,236, or 18.84%, have now fallen to 16,388, or 0.43%. Positivity rate also experienced dramatic decline to 0.56% after reaching 26.76% during the peak, as well as decline in bed occupancy rate to 5.69% from previous 77.77% during the peak. Considering the current condition is the result of overcoming cases that previously spiked, and the decisions to conduct gradual opening was based on the pattern of the increase in cases. Looking back, the increase in cases is inseparable from the increase in community activity and mobility during the holiday period. 2 weeks after Idul Fitri 2020, cases increased by 214% and lasted for 7 weeks, although it can be suppressed by the PSBB policy in several areas. Similar increase occurred 2 weeks after the Maulud Nabi, Christmas, and New Year collectively holidays during the transitional PSBB period. In this period, cases rose again and within 13 weeks reached the first peak with 389% higher cases. Even though the case had reached the lowest point of May 10, 2021, the increase in cases again occurred 3 weeks after the Idul Fitri holiday, even though the policy of eliminating mudik has been set. The existence of the Delta variant triggered a very significant spike in cases until it reached the peak of the second case, amounting to 880% higher compared to the lowest case point. Learning from the upward trends of cases, it is important to analyze the right momentum for a gradual opening. In addition to considering the positive case data and BOR, it is also necessary to observe the effective reproduction rate, or RT. This figure shows the average number of cases that can occur from one positive person in a period of time. At the time of the second peak in cases, the national RT was 1.41, and currently the national RT is 0.70. An RT of less than 1 indicates a low potential for transmission in the community. Therefore, it is hoped that activities can be resumed, although with full vigilance. Control measures are also being prepared by studying the patterns of previous increases in cases. And the condition of COVID-19 in Indonesia, which is currently improving, was achieved due to the support of all levels of society, the role of the health workers at the forefront of control, as well as the collaborations of various sectors, ministries, and institutions. Therefore, in this phase opening period, these achievements must be maintained. By applying the disciplines of health protocols in every activity, extensive testing, and willingness to be vaccinated, community productivity can continue to be carried out safely. Up next, I'll touch on the systematic efforts in handling COVID-19 done by the government while involving various elements in the event of PON 20 in the midst of the pandemic. And Indonesia is said to be quite successful in preventing a spike in cases. And as of 17 October, there was a total of 176 confirmed cases consisting of 97 athletes, 49 confirmed cases consisting of 49 officials, 7 coaches, 10 referees, of which majority of them have recovered. Others confirmed cases came from media personnel, committee, judges, and security with a positivity rate of 1.13%. And currently, more than 60% have been quarantined for 5 days, and the rest will be monitored, especially those who are quarantined in the area. In addition, Indonesia is nationally able to maintain its COVID-19 control performance, which has been proven to be the country with the highest recovery index score in Southeast Asia, even in an atmosphere of gradual opening of the socio-economic sector. This assessment is reviewed from the aspect of case control management, by a coordination meeting with the ranks of the local government to ensure the readiness and commitment of the local government to hold a big event with the implementations of the strict health protocols. Furthermore, the formations of the 3M health protocols task force during the series of events took place as the party chosen to oversee health protocol compliance during the main event. Then continued monitoring of the technical readiness of the health protocols by assistance team from the Central COVID-19 Task Force, which was deployed directly to the regions. This is done to provide guidance for regional parties, especially the readiness to implement health protocols, starting from the adequacy of masks, hand washing facilities, as well as the ability of the PON 20 Healthcare Special Task Force. And during the event, we did monitoring and evaluate compliance with health protocols. In its implementations, various violations found in the field become meaningful inputs, especially the efforts to monitor and discipline the behavior of participants during the event. And monitoring of positive cases in the implementations area with data recorded by the health office and routine surveillance, especially for event participants. Furthermore, if a positive case appears, immediate action is taken to handle the positive case through the alertness of referral for isolations or treatment, contact tracing, and epidemiological investigations to find out the source of the pattern of spread. So far, the Ministry of Health reports that the emergence of positive cases is due to interactions between participants in the room and when eating together, or lax health protocols when watching matches and excessive celebrations. And finally, monitoring participants who have completed their activities in the middle of the event, which they return home. As regulated in the second addendum to the SE Satgas number 17 of 2021, the PON 20 contingent is required to retest after arriving in the area of origin and quarantine for 5 days at the expense of the task force or the local government, with the additions that if the first result is negative, then on the 4th day, quarantine is required to carry out a repeat PCR test. If a positive result is found in one of the test results, the contingent must undergo isolations or treatment at the nearest COVID-19 referral hospitals. And post-event, evaluating the implementations of major activities policy, for example, the mandatory implementations of routine PCR prior to the match and departure, the obligations to provide special quarantine facilities for close contacts, and evaluations of accommodation density and behavior outside the main event. From our experience during the PON 20, we can learn that careful planning is the most crucial thing in organizing a big event in the midst of the COVID-19 storm. In addition, the evaluation conducted after the PON 20 can be utilized as a basis for preparing for future events. The results of these evaluations can be used not limited to organizing sporting events, but other events that involve many people to ensure that these activities can run smoothly and safely despite of COVID-19. And next, recently, the government of Indonesia has also updated its international traveling policy, and based on the SE Satgas number 20 of 2021, or circular letter number 20 of 2021, and SK Kasatgas number 15 of 2021, or decree of the Kasatgas number 15 of 2021 concerning international travel during the COVID-19 pandemic periods, which began to be implemented today. There are several changes and additional arrangements, including the first is quarantine duration is 5 times 24 hours after performing the first RT-PCR test on the first day of arrival. And then the previous addition of the quarantine durations to 8 days in last July was based on the increasing number of cases. The recent decisions to decrease the number of quarantine duration was done based on the current state of COVID-19 cases in Indonesia that is relatively under control. And second is the confirming the time for the second RT-PCR retest, which is on the 4th day of quarantine as determinations of the completion of the quarantine times. And the third is the arrangement for foreigners with the purpose of traveling include centralized airport entry points in Bali province and Riau Islands, and then adding travel administrative prerequisites other than a vaccine certificate and negative PCR results, namely a short visit visa or other entry permit, proof of ownership of health insurance with a minimum coverage of $100,000, which includes financing for handling COVID-19, and proof of booking confirmation and payment for accommodations while staying in Indonesia. And then in addition, based on the latest decree of the Minister of Law and Human Rights, that is in the context of national recovery, currently granting of visas is permitted for travelers for tourism purposes and filmmaking, including for commercial purposes and for the purpose of attending education. In addition, as stipulated in the decree of Kasatgas number 15 of 2021, that 19 countries of origin for travelers who may enter Indonesia are Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, New Zealand, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Liechtenstein, Italy, France, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Poland, Hungary, and Norway. And the decisions to shorten the quarantine durations and expand the criteria for foreigners entering Indonesia was made to increase economic growth in line with the case control efforts that have been carried out. And these decisions resulted from careful considerations of various experts and practitioners in the relevant sectors. For this reason, efforts to mitigate the risk of transmission as much as possible by updating the policy to reduce the durations of quarantine from 8 to 5 days will be effective in suppressing cases if the 6 steps are taken. First is the international travelers are required to undergo quarantine. Second is the international travelers are required to apply health protocols during the quarantine period. The third is the local government provides a reference list of quarantine facilities. The fourth is the government provides accurate diagnostic test tools. And then the fifth is the government is stepping up efforts to trace close contacts. And the sixth is local governments ensure the vaccination coverage is met. Lastly, I would like to invite all parties, both field officers and travelers, to comply with the existing rules. In principle, we are able to gradually be active in activities like before the pandemic, as long as we can achieve high collective health protocol compliance. Periodic monitoring and evaluations is important to ensure that regulations are implemented properly in the field, enforced indiscriminately, and suppress the potential for COVID-19 transmission as much as possible. Before closing today's press conference, here is some additional information regarding COVID-19 in Indonesia. The government is currently drafting a cross-ministerial institutional strategy to anticipate a spike in cases ahead of the year-end holiday. The prepared strategy is expected to be the basis for an effective and inclusive policy by emphasizing these principles. First is the relaxations of activities followed by strict field control. The second is increasing the vaccination rate for the elderly, especially in agglomeration areas and centers of economic growth, and accelerating vaccinations program for children. And as of October 18, 2021, 52.07% of the population in Indonesia had received the first dose and 30.48% had received the second dose. Specifically, for the elderly population, 35.52% of them have received the first dose and 22.41% have received the second dose. While the development of the vaccine for children aged 12 to 17 years is 14.57% of them have received the first dose and 10.99% have received the second dose of vaccination. Layered screening of international travelers and supervisions of activities and educations of the community by the local government regarding health protocols. And next is the exploring several potential COVID-19 treatment alternatives by cooperating with foreign manufacturing to establish factories in Indonesia, such as Molnupiravir from Merck and antiviral 8527 from Roche and Atea Pharmaceutical. In addition, PPKM will continue to be carried out because it has proven effective in suppressing cases, including for the Christmas and the New Year holidays. Therefore, the community is asked to comply with the government policies and to local governments to be able to place the policy so that it can control the situations better. With this, I conclude my presentations and we shall move to media Q&A sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. The first question is from Kate Lam, Reuters. Cases of COVID-19 have plummeted since mid-July in Indonesia. However, vaccination rates remain low overall, with less than 30% of the target population receiving their second shot. To what extent do you think natural immunity or herd immunity could be a contributing factor to the low number of cases and deaths currently? Should be 30% received second shot? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Reuters. If we look at the trend of the vaccinations from mid-July until now, which has reached 30% coverage for the second dose of vaccination, it can be said that the accelerations of vaccination is running rapidly with an increase of almost 22%. And the decline in cases in Indonesia is the result of the hard work of various elements to implement layered policies at almost all points of community activity that have the potential to cause transmission. And regarding specific evidence of the main factors that contribute to the formation of the herd immunity, this justification must be answered with scientific findings, which begins with knowing the prevalence of the antibodies in the community. For this reason, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Home Affairs currently carry out seroprevalence during September to November 2021 through blood collections and antibody titer examinations in 100 regencies and cities in 34 provinces, particularly in densely populated areas with high infection rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. The second question. Indonesia is not currently processing visa applications for foreign journalists. Can you advise when this might change? Thank you.
Thank you. In principle, the criteria for individuals who are allowed to enter Indonesia, including journalists, will evolve in the future following the dynamics of the cases, the readiness of the facilities and infrastructure, as well as the enforcement of health protocols. However, as of currently and based on Permen Kumham number 34 of 2021, which is the decree of the Ministry of Law and Human Rights, number 34, 2021, and also the SE Satgas number 2021, and also SK Kasatgas number 15 of 2021, which is the decree of the head of the task force, number 15 of 2021. Foreigners who are allowed to enter Indonesia are the owners of the service visa, diplomatic visa, visit visa, limited stay visa, service stay permit, and then diplomatic stay permit, limited stay permit, and permanent stay permit. And holders of the APEC business travel cards, or KPP, and crews of transportations means that come with their transportation, means as well as traditional border crossers. Those coming from countries with bilateral travel corridor arrangement, TCA, scheme, and countries with total cases of less than or equal to 50 per 100,000 inhabitants, and a low positivity rate of less than 5%, which is from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, New Zealand, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Liechtenstein, Italy, France, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Poland, Hungary, and Norway. And also foreigners who have attained special consideration or permissions in writing from the ministry or agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is from Natalia Santi from Australian Financial Review. How far is the development of vaccine Merah Putih? Thank you.
Thank you, Australian Financial Review. Presently, vaccines produced by the Eijkman Institute and Bio Farma based on the recombinant protein have reached the optimization phase of the vaccine seeds. And on the other hand, inactivated vaccines produced by Erlangga University and Biotis is in the preclinical trial stage. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question, does the government plan to give vaccines to children below 12 years old? Thank you.
Yes, so far the vaccine supply is dedicated to the populations with the age range of 12 years old and above, particularly for the high-risk populations such as the elderly. But in the future, if the vaccines available, of course, we will also continue with vaccinations for the children under 12. Thank you. And
Thanks,
now, yeah, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anyone else has questions they would like to ask, please add them perhaps in the chat room or the chat session. There is a couple of questions from Reuters also. When do you expect that Indonesia will begin giving the third booster shots to the general population?
Okay, we are prioritizing on people with the first and the second shots, and then once we are ready for the first dose, the third dose, which is hopefully the beginning of next year, then we will continue with that.
Sure. And one other question also from Reuters. With the quarantine protocols, do you see those changing as the vaccination rates go up? I mean, just this last week, we've seen that Bali is planning to cut its quarantine requirement to 5 days from 8 for foreign travellers who come in. Do you see that as something that will be adopted across the country or perhaps fall even further?
We will be having the change of the policy step by step. And of course, we tried for some areas in Indonesia. We want to make sure we can evaluate that. If something happened, then we can control it very well. So that's why we go step by step and not going from the whole Indonesia. Thank you.
Sure. So I think we have a question now from Ismi at Nikkei. What are the main factors that contribute to the current low confirmed cases, and how will it be maintained until the holiday season at the end of the year?
Yes, thank you, Nikki. So basically, as I mentioned, that we have tiered policies where we restrict or limit the international travelers and also domestic travelings as well, and also restrictions of the activities in different areas based on the level. And we will use this policy continue over the Christmas and also New Year's to make sure that if there are some increase in cases, we are aware of and we can control directly. So that's why the PPKM still in effect. Thank you.
Okay. Question from Ian Cameron. Children under 12 cannot travel domestically at the moment. Is this likely to change before the upcoming Christmas holiday season?
There are several groups that have asked the same questions, and we will consider that. But we want to make sure that if we change the policy, we want to make sure that it is still safe for those children under 12. Of course, we are just starting to open that for some public facilities, but not yet for the traveling. But hopefully, before that, we can open that.
Sure. From Channi Vasandani at the Australian newspaper, online news reports are quoting hospital doctors who claim to see an increase in suspected COVID cases. Is this something to be concerned about right now?
We receive reports and concern about it from the physicians as well. But to see the cases in Indonesia, at least reporting from Jakarta area, since this is the report from Jakarta, there is a slight increase, but not much. So that's why this is part of the awareness that the healthcare facilities report to the government. And we need to ascertain the situation so that we can control if something happen more than regular. Thank you.
Sure. One question from Ilham at the European Union delegation. Do these open border policies also apply across Indonesia and not just Bali?
Not yet at this moment. Thank you for the questions. But of course, we will open more once our policy be successful in terms of still limiting the case and increase the socioeconomic activities. We will open more when proven that this policy, the careful policy, is effective. Thank you.
So one follow-up question from Ilham. Several European countries are on the list of those places allowed to travel to Indonesia, but others are not. What kind of criteria does the government use to consider which countries can enter Indonesia at the moment?
Yeah, of course, as I mentioned, it's based on the positive case per 100,000 populations, which is below 50 per 100,000 populations. And then also the positivity rate, which is low or below 5%. And then, of course, we will consider the reciprocal arrangement between countries. Thank you.
Okay. Tria from Mainichi Shimbun. Epidemiologists are predicting that revenge travel will trigger the third wave of COVID-19. What is the government's anticipation about this problem?
As I mentioned earlier, that with the PPKM policy that's still in effect, we will use the PPKM policy and leveling policies to make sure that there will not be increase of cases. If there is an increase in cases, the level will be changed and we will consider to restrict more activities on those areas where the leveling is increased.
Well, just one more question about that predicted spike at the end of the year during the Christmas holiday period. What is the different modelling suggesting to you as to what the worst case scenario could be, or even the best case scenario? What are you seeing in terms of modelling on how that new surge could happen?
Again, those modeling usually based on the increased mobility of the people during the holiday. And we learned from the past, from last year, that if we don't really restrict the people mobility, then of course we cannot control the increase of cases after that. As we see from the past, that the case increased in early January. So that's why we want to make sure that the policy of PPKM is in effect, because it's already proven that during the second peak, we can manage to reduce the case in relatively 8 weeks. And hopefully with the same policy in effect, we can control the situation so that any projections of the cases that hopefully will not happen in terms of the spike of the case.
Yeah, do you have any fears that it could be anything like what we saw in July and August of this year?
Yeah, of course, everybody fears about it, especially globally, because the policy in Indonesia will not or are not implemented in other countries. Every country has its own policy, and we learn from the past, from ourselves, Indonesia, as a big country, and we will continue to use the effective policy, the tiered policies, basically, and we monitor every day. So we will use the same approach to make sure that our policy effective to control the potential spike of the cases.
Sure. If anyone has any more questions, now's your chance to add them onto that chat list. But look, Professor, there was some recent modelling done by the Health Institute attached to Washington University, I believe, that suggested they believe potentially 29% of all Indonesians, which was something like 78 million people, could have had COVID already. Are you aware of that modelling, and what do you say about those sorts of figures?
Yeah, we know that because of the first and the second peak, of course, it will increase the number of the people get infected, and that will add on the people who get vaccinated as well. So both on those events, occurrence, that will contribute to the, the resilience of the people increased because of the protections from the either natural or man-made vaccinations or immunity naturally occur. So that's the contributions that probably will contribute that the next case or spike will not be as high as before. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the policy is still implemented.
Sure. Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Otherwise, we might be able to let you go there, Professor, if there's no one else. You get an early mark. Thanks very much for speaking to us again tonight.
Okay.
I think that's the last of the questions. But yeah, we hope to have you back sometime in the not too distant future if
yes, sure.
You're willing to come and talk to us again.
Sure.
That would be great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the JFCC, then
Yeah.
thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, anak-anak sekolah semua bawa ke Jakarta. Gimana sih? Anak-anak mau apa bawa ke Jakarta? Enggak mau. Mau. Oh, mau. Saya kira enggak mau.